come up with a fair ordinance that for all concerned, the family farms, the small businesses, the rural residents, and the CAFO operators. I would just like to share with you this evening some changes that agriculture has happened in agriculture over the last 2 or 3 decades. In the 40s and 50s, farm families were able to make a living on maybe 100 acres or less. But today it requires several hundred or maybe thousands, and many times off-farm income to support a family. Today, less than 2% of the population are farmers. Luckily, I am a 4th-generation farmer living on the same farm, born and raised there on the land that my great-grandfather settled here in the 1860s. And my son and grandson now partner with me and plan to continue this operation. So, you know, this ordinance is also going to protect farming, not just residents. There are only so many acres to be farmed anymore, and as the doctor just said, with urban renewal and expansion, those acres are now growing homes instead of crops. And so with the increased farm sizes and the larger machinery, there will be fewer individuals farming these acres. But when we talk about livestock enterprises, we have to think about the CAFOs, which are thousands of animals under one roof, and they're coming to our rural areas. With the concept of the concentrated animal feeding operation, there appears to be no limit to the number of animals that can be put on small acreage, and many of these CAFOs are coming to our rural areas. With livestock farms of traditional sizes, nature has been able to absorb the waste and the pollutants that they produced. But with these existing laws and regulations and these new CAFOs at their enormity, which I guess I have to call almost industrial agriculture nowadays, or factory farms, our environment can just not absorb the waste that they are producing. To be permitted for a CAFO now, really IDEM, Indiana Department of Environmental Measures, are really these are the only agency that really has good hard control over these, and that's statewide. And they deal only with groundwater and surface water with no air quality, no health issues, and other items such as property values and in general the quality of life around these factories. And we got to remember this point: IDEM has never turned down a permit. We have to remember that our soil is by far our most valuable natural resource. Other countries have oil, some have minerals, whatever. Ours still made, and I learned this way back in ag class in high school, our soil is still the most valuable natural resource that we have, and we should not be treating our soil like dirt by saturating the land with waste in these factory farms. I want you all to understand that I am not against the expansion of agriculture. That's been my life and my family's life. But I also don't see why we have to industrialize this livestock sector. Farming isn't really a job or an occupation, but it is really a way of life, and operated by a family farmer and his family. I would kind of like to define a family farm here in closing. They are good stewards of the land and animals. They're good family farms invest and grow their operations to support their families and give something back to the community. They live on the land and the land supports them. They care about the area, the neighbors, the wells, and the water. We are fortunate in this county that the existing CAFOs that we have are also, even at their size, are still family farms owned and operated by the families. But we have a new group which we are going to have to be dealing with soon, and most of these CAFOs are owned and operated by off-site corporations, or as I call them, absentee landlords. Many times the goal is for profit only and at the huge expense of those who surround them. I believe this ordinance complements IDEM regulations, and Indiana statutes. It is a good start in controlling these industrial livestock factories by protecting the health and well-being of rural residents and existing farms in St. Joe County. With the Ag Advisory Committee revisiting the CAFO issue on a regular basis, the ordinance should be able to keep pace with the livestock industry in the future years. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks again. Just wanted to take the time to thank everybody that's here tonight that has shown interest in this ordinance, and also thank everybody that's been involved in our process throughout this whole summer and fall. I guess I'm going to talk briefly about the existing situation in our county here today. Like she said, I work in the ag banking industry, and also my family have some family members that own and operate a CAFO here in this county. Today we have 5 CAFOs in St. Joe County. 4 of them are hog farms, and 1 is a chicken operation. We've had CAFOs in this county since 1976. The first one was established in 76, and then the last one, to my knowledge, was established in 1994. So, we've had 5 of them here in the county for a number of years. Just to give you a little bit of perspective, I think I'm just going to throw some numbers out here. One of the operations today has 6,000 hogs on one site. The other operation has 7,000 hogs, and those are both what you would call finishing sites, to where the pigs are brought in at what they call feeder pig size and then finished out to market weight. So out of those 2 facilities, they're probably marketing somewhere around 25 to 30,000 pigs per year, because you can turn the barns between 2 and 3 times per year. And the other 2 hog sites are both farrowing operations where the baby pigs are actually born. And those 2 operations, the one would produce about 25,000 pigs a year, and the other one about 10,000 pigs a year. So I think it's important to know that, these although the CAFO definition is relatively new, we've had these operations in the county for quite a while now. Like a couple other members of the committee have stated, that agriculture is much like other industries, where we're seeing consolidation. Farms are expanding. 30 years ago, if you had drove in the rural areas of this county and across the state, like Dean said, you would have seen smaller operations. Most of them probably had a few livestock running around, and they made it, off a small operation and small numbers. Really what we've seen is those smaller operations, a lot of those have either sold their livestock and continued to grain farm, or like Dean said, got off-farm jobs and continue to have the farm on the side. An interesting fact that we kind of came across this year was that in 1976 there was more hogs in the state of Indiana than what there is today. Now I don't know with these new applications coming in how that will change, but so I think really what's happening here in Indiana and in the county and probably across the country is you've got the true animal numbers are probably maybe even less than what we were at 30 years ago, but it's just higher consolidations on each farm. In order to support the same size family or the same number of partners, they've been forced to grow larger. Maybe 30 years ago, they were able to make $25 or $30 per pig that they sold. And I'm speaking from the pork industry standpoint, because that's where I have the most experience. But they might have, on average, made $25 or $30 per pig that they sold. Well, today, a rule of thumb, maybe only make $5 or $10 per pig. It's a commodity type business. It's a low margin business. So they've been forced to get larger just to support the same size of operation that their family. Another way is it's just why we're seeing larger operations. They're able to spread their overhead costs over more animal units. Technology allows them to do it. One man can take care of more animals today than what he could 30 years ago because of the technology. And also, 30 years ago, as you would have drove around the rural areas, you probably would have seen a lot of animals that were running outside on open lots. Today, with these CAFOs, they're all confined, and the manure is contained in one area in a you know, concrete pit or, you know, an outside lagoon. So if they're managed right, I feel that there could be less environmental concerns with these than what there were, you know, years ago with the smaller operations, but yet, you know, where they were allowed to run outside. I guess one other point is why are we seeing them, you know, we're seeing some movement from North Carolina, other states to the Midwest. Why are we seeing that? Well, one of the main reasons is the Midwest, this is the source of feed. We produce a lot of the corn and the soybeans in the Midwest area. So it just makes sense to have the animals close to the feed source. Also, you know, slaughtering facilities, processing plants are here in the Midwest, so it makes sense to have the animals close to where those processing facilities are. And also, we've got the land base to handle it from a manure application standpoint.
Given the fact that I work across the state, right now we're working in 17 counties that are working on developing ordinances at one level or another. Most of those counties began their work in 2005. One of the things that we saw in 2005, we saw two things. One, the establishment of Indiana's Department of Agriculture. And then two, we saw a goal coming out of the state of Indiana of the Daniels administration announcing that one of their goals was that they wanted to double hog production across the state and do that in 5 years. And as Mark said earlier, if you look even at just this year alone, we have 175 new proposals that have gone in. Those are applications for CAFO in 2006. So if you look at the permit applications that are going into IDEM since the announcement of that goal, you see that not only are we well on our way to doubling hog production in the state, but also production of dairy and production of poultry as well. And so as an organization, and also for the steering committee, our efforts look to find the balance not only between the science that exists out there for public health issues, concerns that are raised, but then also protecting the livelihood of a farmer and being able to allow him the competitiveness that needs to happen to protect his livelihood. And we know that there is also a goal and a changing landscape. I think a couple of people have called it of farming across the state in Indiana, and we know that I personally feel, coming from a Hoosier homestead farm myself, and I'm a fourth-generation farmer, that farming is not only the lifeblood of our economy in Indiana, but it's also an essential part of the food system, which everyone in this room takes part of several times during the day, or at least I hope you do. I'm sure you probably do. And so, with that said, CAC organizationally, we see the efforts that everyone put into the ordinance as something that is not only good for the livestock producers in St. Joseph County, but also something that is good for our rural communities and ultimately good for consumers. And so definitely urge support for it.
As we've heard tonight, huge corporate CAFOs are on the move all across Indiana. As Jolita said, the current state administration strategic plan is to double the number of livestock in Indiana within the next 5 years by promoting the establishment of new CAFOs and by expediting IDEM's permit process. At a summit in Indianapolis earlier this month, Governor Daniels stated that he is hell-bent to restore and revivify agriculture in the state without apology. I find that frightening. The large corporate interests have responded to Governor Daniels' call, flooding IDEM with the CAFO applications that we've heard about. IDEM has responded by decreasing the turnaround times of the 175 applications so far this year. 140 have been approved already in unprecedented turnaround times of as little as 45 days. Walnut Grove Dairy was the first of this new wave of CAFO applications here in St. Joe County when it filed with IDEM back in May. Now there are rumblings of other CAFOs looking to file permits for other parts of this county as well. At the same time as this is going on, the evidence is growing of the long-term health effects on nearby residents from high-level emissions of hydrogen sulfide, ammonia, and dust from poorly run CAFOs. These health effects include eye and throat irritation, blurred vision, respiratory illnesses, diarrhea, vomiting, confusion, headaches, depression, and chronic fatigue. In addition, many CAFOs across the United States have been cited for spills and discharges of contaminated waters to local ditches, ponds, streams, rivers, and even private wells. Just 10 days ago, a team of 36 scientists led by Dr. Peter Thorne, a professor of environmental engineering and toxicology at the University of Iowa, issued a series of reports outlining the need for stricter regulations and increased monitoring of air and water near CAFOs. Their report concluded that the industrialization of livestock production over the past 3 decades has not been accompanied by commensurate modernization of regulations to protect the health of the public. IDEM issues permits for CAFOs, but IDEM's mandate is strictly limited to surface water management. IDEM rules prohibit them from taking into consideration impacts on air quality, local private wells, public health, or a host of other concerns. IDEM officials have repeatedly stated that these issues must be addressed at the county level. Andy Miller, Indiana's Secretary of Agriculture, recently told a group of citizens from 4 counties concerned about CAFOs that had repeated violations that went unaddressed by IDEM that they should contact their county health department because, he said, it's not a state issue. But he did concede that most counties are not ready for this type of industrial growth and do not have the necessary regulations in place to do anything about it. And that is exactly the picture here in St. Joe County that we found. Like so many other counties across Indiana, our local agricultural ordinances were written with small family farms in mind, not enormous corporate facilities. With the arrival of Walnut Grove, our local county officials found themselves faced with a whole new breed of CAFO in a highly populated area on unsuitable flood-prone soils and with no local oversight or control with which to protect the public health or our local resources. The only restriction on CAFOs in our current ordinance is that CAFO buildings and waste lagoons be 30 feet from their neighbor's property. The dog kennel must be set back 300 feet, but a 12-acre, 15 million gallon open-air sewage lagoon with the potential to spew huge quantities of hydrogen sulfide and ammonia into the air only has to be set back 30 feet. Not only is there no protection in our current ordinances for nearby residents, there is also no protection for rural schools, medical facilities, or churches. 10 of the 13 townships in this county have land open for CAFO development, as we can see from Mr. Nelson's map. If a huge corporate CAFO with an absentee landlord run out of New Jersey decides to move in near you, wouldn't you want your local officials to be able to take measures to protect your public health? This ordinance is not just about Walnut Grove, Dairy, or Union Township. This ordinance is of critical importance for all the residents of St. Joe County, farmers and non-farmers alike, and it's long overdue. Thank you.
The process was very simple. The committee itself had some pretty polarized views, to say the least. A handful of livestock farmers, both large and small, mostly on one end of the spectrum, as you can figure out for yourself. And then concerned rural residents on the other side that were worried about a multitude of things, health effects, property values, had some serious concerns, and that had heard the headlines and had seen some reports of some disturbing news about CAFO. So there really wasn't too many people in the middle. But the nice thing about it is that at the end, I think we've got an ordinance that makes the most sense for the most amount of people in St. Joseph County. The first two meetings were just largely what we call scoping meetings, where we brought forward issues that had been brought forward on an individual basis to either Mark or the council and the commissioners. Just one by one decided if that was an issue that this committee was going to address. Whether or not it was relevant to a health ordinance to begin with, whether or not there was sufficient scientific evidence to merit further research into this subject. Took two meetings just to accomplish that. From there, we started knocking down the issues one at a time, and the setback issue took 3 to 4 meetings, if my recollection is correct. But overall, it was a really neat process, and I'm really thankful and proud to have been a part of it. A little background on myself. Grew up a farm boy in southern Indiana, Columbus, Indiana. Moved to the area, to this area in 1997. Have worked on dairy farms, beef farms, pork farms, both large and small. Have a degree in agriculture from Purdue University. Presently, am operating my own small beef operation. In my tenure, amongst all those operations, I've kind of seen it all. I've seen some pretty nice, neat, the traditional small operations that I grew up with in the 70s and early 80s. Worked for one, what you can only term as a nightmare, CAFO style operation in the early 90s. So kind of felt like I was in a unique position to really have mixed emotions on the whole CAFO issue. I've seen the good, I've seen the bad, and my personal belief going into this process was there are some good things about CAFOs. There are some positives for the county as a whole, not just the individual farmer, but for the economic development of rural St. Joe County, right down to the consumer that's buying his or her food out of the grocery meat case or what have you. But as Dean eloquently stated, anytime you concentrate that many animals in an unnatural state on a small piece of property, the risks of contamination of health effects obviously go up. The thing that mitigates those risks are twofold: technology and management. We're seeing technology evolve. Management, just like in any business, varies by the manager. So that's kind of the other neat thing I see about this ordinance is it gives some pretty nice incentives to bring the right type of operations to St. Joe County. It gives incentives for operations to be good managers and to incorporate state-of-the-art technology that mitigates risks to both health and environmental issues. So to me, that's the two strengths of the ordinance are that, the incentives it builds into performance-based dialogue it builds into the ordinance to incent the good operators to locate and sit in St. Joseph County. The other really strong positive I see is the Agriculture Advisory Committee that Mark stated first. Agriculture, especially in the last 30 or 40 years, has not done a very good job of communicating with their customers. As agriculture has gotten more down the commodity route, in other words, we're really selling raw materials now. You don't go buy a bushel of corn at the supermarket to take home and feed your family. You buy corn flakes. Well, from the farm gate to that corn flakes box, is about 4 or 5 different processors, retailers, wholesale distributors, you name it. Every one of those steps takes that farmer farther away from the consumer, and therefore probably farther away from the neighbor that lives right down the road, who's ultimately buying his product, but they may never talk. So I think the Agriculture Advisory Board is a good step of bridging that gap, so that the farmer who might be the next door neighbor of a rural resident actually has to sit and talk about these issues, see what's affecting each other, what others perceive as value to their quality of life or their livelihood in agriculture. Because a lot of times there's diabolically different viewpoints. One person's 3 million gallon manure lagoon is just something you can't even get your mind around, how we can even allow those things, in your backyard. And for somebody like Andy and me, who's probably scooped 3 million gallons of manure in our lifetime, it's as natural as the soil you walk on and the air you breathe. So when you have that much polarization in viewpoints, you got to sit down and talk to work these issues out. That's what this ordinance did, and I was proud to be part of it. So I hope you'll, ask the questions for sure. If you need a copy of the ordinance, I'm sure you can get one. I'm pretty proud of it. I think we all are. And I think it's good for the county.